Nathaniel Wallace had everything a man could want. At least that's what people used to say. From the outside, he was the image of success, the founder of Wallace Hospitality Group, owner of dozens of fine dining restaurants across Texas, and once featured on the cover of Forbes as the chef who became a king. But that was before the crash, before the silence, before the chair. Now his name was still on every restaurant window, his face still printed on billboards downtown, but the man himself had vanished. Every morning, at exactly 6 o'clock a.m., the mansion's blinds opened automatically, revealing the Dallas skyline outside his glass walls. Sunlight spilled across polished floors, expensive art, empty space. In the middle of it all sat Nate, 42 years old, sharp suit, motionless in a sleek carbon fiber wheelchair that cost more than most people's houses. His reflection in the window showed a man who once ruled an empire, now ruled by pain. He sipped black coffee, always black, no sugar, while scrolling through endless reports on his iPad. Numbers, margins, expansions, terminations. It was his only ritual, his only sense of control. Every employee feared him. Every manager obeyed him. And yet, no one really saw him. To most, Nathaniel Wallace was a legend. To those who worked for him, he was a storm that never passed. He spoke little and smiled less. Firing someone was as routine as changing his shirt, and today, another storm was brewing. "Sir," said Marcus, his personal assistant, stepping carefully into the room. "About last night's dinner service at the Ember House." There was another complaint. Nate didn't look up. "About what?" The new waitress dropped a tray in front of the investor's table. A slow exhale. He turned his wheelchair slightly, his voice steady, cold. "Fire her," Marcus hesitated. "Sir, it was her first day." Then it'll be her last." "But sir," Nate's eyes lifted, sharp as glass. "Do I look like I'm asking for negotiation?" The assistant swallowed hard. "No, sir." "Then do your job." Before lunch, the moment Marcus left, the silence returned, the kind that echoed. Nate stared at his own reflection again. It was always there, the man in the chair, the stranger behind his own eyes. He hated that reflection, because it reminded him of her, Camille, the woman who'd once called him the most alive man she'd ever met. The same woman who left 3 months after the accident, when he still believed he could get better. "I can't do this," she'd said, standing by the hospital window, her engagement ring trembling in her hand. "I didn't sign up for this life." He remembered that moment more vividly than the crash itself. The sound of her heels leaving the room had hurt worse than the metal that crushed his legs. He never cried after that day, not once. Instead, he built walls made of money, precision, and control. Now everything in his world obeyed him, people, schedules, even the temperature of the air inside his house. Except the memories, those never obeyed. At exactly 8 o'clock a meter, the intercom buzzed. "Mr. Wallace," said the head manager of his flagship restaurant, the Ember House. "We're short on waitstaff. The agency sent someone new. Should I approve her file?" Nate glanced at his screen, emotionless. "What's her name?" "Grace Miller." He hesitated, just for a second. The name carried a softness he wasn't used to hearing. He cleared his throat. "Send her in at 7 tomorrow. She probably last a day. Maybe 2. "Yes, sir." He turned off the intercom, wheeled himself to the window, and looked out at the sprawling city. Cars moved like blood through its veins, people rushing, living, dreaming. He used to be one of them. Now he just watched. Outside, the morning light glowed warm and alive. Inside, Nate sat still, his world a cage of glass and silence. The phone buzzed again. He ignored it. For a long moment, the camera, if this were film, would linger on his face, expressionless, yet heavy with something unspoken. Regret, exhaustion, a quiet war between life and numbness. Then, faintly from somewhere deep in the house, came the echo of piano keys, the home's automated sound system turning on by mistake, playing a song he hadn't heard in years. A waltz, slow, beautiful, painful. He froze. That song had played at the engagement party he never finished dancing. For a second, the mask cracked. His eyes softened, not tears, not yet, but close. Then he pressed a button on his remote control. The music stopped. Silence again. He whispered under his breath, barely audible. Music is for people who still feel something. Cut to black. Grace Miller's alarm rang at 5:15 a meter. Not the soft kind of alarm, the one that screams survival. Her small apartment was barely bigger than a motel room. A twin bed, a chipped dresser, one photo taped to the wall, her and her mom, smiling in front of a rusty old truck in Georgia. Her mother's eyes looked tired even in the photo, the same eyes Grace had inherited. "Morning, Mom," she whispered, touching the picture frame. Her mom was 2 states away now, fighting a lung condition that kept her in and out of hospitals. Grace sent what little she could each week. Tips, mostly. Sometimes just a prayer. She slipped into her uniform, black slacks, white blouse, hair tied up neatly. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest. The city was still waking up when she caught the first bus. The smell of coffee, exhaust, and rain hung in the air. She sat by the window, headphones in, but no music playing, just silence and thoughts. It had been 3 months since she'd moved to Dallas, chasing work after her mom's medical bills exploded. She'd done diners, catering gigs, hotel shifts. None of them paid enough. None of them lasted. Now the Ember House, the crown jewel of Wallace's empire, was her last shot before the rent notice turned into eviction. When she arrived, the building looked like something out of a dream. Tall glass windows, gold signage, valet cars lined up even at dawn. Inside, chandeliers reflected light off marble floors. Everything screamed wealth. At the front desk, a tall woman in a black suit barely looked up. Name? Grace Miller. "I'm supposed to start today." The woman typed something, then sighed. "You're with table service. Follow me." And a word of advice? Grace blinked. "Yes, ma'am." "Don't talk back. Don't make eye contact. Don't take anything personally." Grace frowned. "Excuse me?" "You'll see." They entered the main dining area. In the center, near the window overlooking the skyline, sat Nathaniel Wallace, the man himself. Even sitting, he radiated presence. Dark suit, stillness like stone, eyes that calculated everything. He didn't glance up as Grace approached. "Mr. Wallace," said the supervisor, "this is the new waitress." "Late," Nate said flatly. Grace looked at the clock. 7:02. I was told 7. 7 means ready by 7, not walking in." She swallowed. "Yes, sir." He finally turned his head, studying her like an investor reviewing a contract. "Grace Miller," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the name. "You from here?" "Georgia, sir." Figures. Her brow furrowed, but she said nothing. He wheeled closer, the soft hum of the chair filling the silence. "You'll be assigned to morning prep and table service. You'll shadow the senior staff until you're no longer a liability. You'll follow every rule, every schedule, and every instruction. Understood?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Don't expect kindness. We don't serve that here." The supervisor cleared her throat awkwardly. "I'll show her around, sir." But before they could leave, Nate added, "One more thing." They both turned. "If she drops anything, plate, glass, tray, she's out. Immediately." Grace felt her pulse quicken. "Yes, sir." "Then get to work." He turned away, rolling toward his office, leaving her standing in silence. The supervisor exhaled. "Welcome to hell," she muttered. The next few hours were a blur. Grace shadowed the others, memorizing procedures, how to polish glassware, how to plate, how to fold napkins into precise triangles. Everything had to look perfect. Even a fingerprint could mean a lecture. By 10 a.m., her hands were raw from washing and her stomach empty. The other waitresses whispered stories like ghost tales. He once fired a girl for saying good morning too loud. He made a chef cry last week. He hasn't smiled in 2 years. Grace kept her head down. She wasn't here to gossip. She was here to survive. But at noon, fate decided otherwise. She was carrying a tray of wine glasses when someone bumped into her from behind. The tray tilted, one glass fell, shattering across the floor. The room froze. Nate appeared from his office, silent as a shadow. He looked down at the mess, then at her. Grace's heart pounded. "It was an accident, sir. I'll clean it. I told you the rules," he said quietly. "One glass, one mistake. Sir, please." He raised a hand. "You're done." The other waitresses avoided eye contact. The supervisor looked mortified but said nothing. Grace knelt, picking up the shards carefully. "I need this job," she whispered. "Then you should have held on tighter," Nate replied coldly. Her fingers trembled as she dropped the glass pieces into the bin. A small cut formed on her palm. She didn't flinch. When she finally stood, she looked him in the eye, not with defiance, but with something deeper, dignity. "You can fire me if you need to, Mr. Wallace," she said softly. "But one day, you'll run out of people to punish. And all that'll be left to fire is yourself." The words landed like a quiet slap. For the first time, Nate didn't reply. He just stared at her, expression unreadable. Then, to everyone's shock, he said, "You've got one more day. Don't waste it." He turned his chair and rolled away. The restaurant buzzed with whispers the moment he was gone. The waitress who talked back and lived. Grace took a deep breath, pressing her cut hand against a napkin. "Guess I'm still here," she murmured. Out of sight, behind the glass walls of his office, Nate watched her from afar, jaw tight, eyes distant. Something about her voice lingered in his mind. Not fear, not pity. Something he hadn't seen in a long, long time. Courage. He hated it. But he couldn't stop thinking about it. As the camera fades, Grace wipes the blood from her hand, ties her apron tighter, and returns to work, her reflection merging with the restaurant's glass walls. Two broken souls in the same cage, one made of steel, the other of circumstance. And neither knows that they're about to heal each other. That night, the restaurant glowed like a temple of glass and money. Laughter echoed from tables filled with people in suits, heels, and diamond watches, all toasting to their own reflections. From the back hallway, Grace balanced trays, weaving through the maze of white tablecloths and whispers. Her feet ached, her palms burned where the cut had reopened. But she refused to limp. She could feel Nate Wallace's presence even when he wasn't in the room, like static in the air. Every server stiffened when his chair rolled by. The quiet hum of its motor had become a sound everyone feared. Tonight, though, he sat in the corner of the dining area, silent as a ghost, a glass of Merlot untouched beside him. He was watching, always watching. By closing time, Grace was one of the last to leave. The kitchen was dark, except for a small lamp near the service counter. She was scrubbing wine stains from the marble when she heard his voice. "You missed a spot." She froze, cloth in hand. He was there, just beyond the doorway, still in his suit, the wheels of his chair glinting in the dim light. "I was just finishing, sir," she said. He rolled closer, stopping a few feet away. "You worked the entire shift after nearly being fired this morning." "Yes, sir." "Why?" Grace kept scrubbing. "Because I need the paycheck. That's not what I asked." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Because I don't quit just because life gets hard." He tilted his head slightly. "You talk like you've lived 1,000 lives already." Grace smiled faintly. "Feels like it some days." A silence hung between them, heavy, almost intimate. Then he said quietly, "You shouldn't get used to pain. It makes you weak." She wiped her hands, her voice steady. Or stronger. Depends on what you do with it. Something flickered in his expression, almost like recognition. He turned the chair toward the hallway. You can lock up when you're done. She watched him go, unsure if she'd just been insulted or respected. When the restaurant emptied, Nate didn't go home right away. He rolled through the back corridors, past the kitchen, and into a room few people knew existed. A private dining hall he hadn't opened in years. The lights came on automatically, revealing tall mirrors, a chandelier, and a grand piano in the corner. It wasn't just a dining room, it used to be a ballroom. The place smelled of polish and nostalgia. Dust lingered on the keys of the piano. He wheeled closer, pressing one note softly, a minor. The sound echoed through the empty space like a memory trying to breathe again. He used to dance here. Back when legs weren't just decoration. Back when Camille would laugh, spin barefoot across the marble, and call him her rhythm. He could almost see her, red dress, golden hair, the smell of her perfume mixing with champagne and jazz. And then came the crash. He saw it again in flashes, rain, headlights, the scream of metal twisting. Then darkness. Then the hospital ceiling, white, endless. Doctors murmuring words that shattered everything. You'll never walk again. He remembered Camille's face in that sterile room, pale and terrified. At first, she came every day. Then every few, then not at all. When she finally left for good, she didn't even cry. Just whispered, "I can't live like this," and walked out with her heels clicking down the hallway like gunshots. That sound never stopped echoing. Now in the silent ballroom, Nate stared at his reflection in the mirrors. The wheelchair, the lifeless posture, the man he didn't recognize. "You ruined everything," he muttered under his breath. He wasn't sure if he was talking to fate or himself. The next morning, the world pretended it hadn't fallen apart. Sunlight, traffic, meetings, emails. Life, or whatever passed for it. Grace arrived early again, quietly humming to herself as she set tables. She noticed a door at the end of the hallway slightly ajar, the one that led to the private room. Curiosity tugged at her. She peeked inside. The room was beautiful. Huge mirrors, high ceilings, faint traces of music still hanging in the air. A single piano under a dust cover stood in the corner. She stepped inside, awed. Everything about it felt sad, sacred, forgotten. Her fingers brushed the piano's lid. She lifted it, pressing one key. A low, soft note filled the air, the same A minor Nate had played hours earlier. And for a brief second, she smiled. Music, real music. Then his voice cut through the air like a blade. "What are you doing here?" Grace turned, startled. Nate was in the doorway, his face unreadable. I'm sorry." The door was open. "I didn't mean to. You shouldn't be in this room." "I didn't know." "Now you do." He rolled toward her slowly, the wheels gliding over the marble with precision. "This place isn't for staff, it's private." Grace hesitated. "It's beautiful." His jaw tightened. "It's nothing." She looked around. "Doesn't feel like nothing. Feels like a memory." "Get out," he said, voice sharp. She nodded quickly, stepping toward the door, but then stopped. Wallace?" He exhaled, impatient. "What? I know I shouldn't say this, but you built all this. The restaurants, the name, everything. But you look at it like it's your prison." He turned slowly, his glare like frost. "What did you just say?" She swallowed hard. "Your prison isn't the chair, sir. It's your heart." Silence. The air between them turned heavy, electric. No one had ever spoken to him like that. Not since the accident. For a moment, Nate just stared, the kind of stare that could burn through steel. Then, without a word, he turned the chair and rolled out, the doors swinging shut behind him. Grace stood there, heart pounding, realizing she might have just ended her job, or started something much bigger. That night, Nate didn't sleep. Her words looped in his mind. Your prison isn't the chair, it's your heart. He told himself she was wrong, that she was naive, that she didn't understand what real loss was. But as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a quiet voice inside him whispered the one thing he refused to believe. What if she's right? The next morning, he sat in the garden behind his house, something he hadn't done in years. Sunlight touched the edge of his chair, and for once, he didn't move back into the shade. He watched a small bird land on the railing, fragile, alive. It hopped, sang, and flew away. He envied it. Freedom. That same afternoon, he called Marcus. "Get me the event schedule," he said. "We're reinstating the annual charity gala. The one you canceled since the accident." "Yes, it's time." Marcus sounded surprised. "What's the occasion?" Nate's tone was calm, but his eyes were distant. "Let's just say I have something to prove." He didn't explain to whom, but deep down, he knew. As the camera fades to black, Nate sits alone at the piano again, pressing one soft note. This time, he doesn't stop. He keeps playing, hesitant, clumsy, but real. And somewhere, maybe miles away, Grace finishes her shift, humming the same melody under her breath, without knowing whose heart she's beginning to heal. 2 days after Grace's confrontation in the ballroom, the atmosphere at the Ember House had shifted, slightly, almost imperceptibly. Nate Wallace hadn't fired anyone in 48 hours. For this staff, that was practically a holiday. He moved through the restaurant quietly, sharper than ever but less venomous. There was a strange restlessness in him, the kind that comes before a storm or a revelation. Even Grace could feel it. He barely looked at her now, but somehow she could sense his eyes following her whenever she passed. The restaurant manager, Lisa, noticed it too. "What's going on between you two?" she whispered as they prepped silverware before service. "Nothing," Grace said. "Absolutely nothing," Lisa smirked. "You sure?" "He hasn't yelled once since you showed up." Grace tied her apron tighter. "Maybe he's just running out of people to intimidate." That afternoon, Nate sat in his private office reviewing reports when a knock echoed at the door. He didn't look up. "Marcus, I said no interruptions." The door opened anyway. "Then it's a good thing I'm not Marcus," came a warm, familiar voice. He froze, then looked up and saw her. Eleanor Wallace. His mother stood framed in the doorway, dressed in pale cream, pearls at her throat, her silver hair perfectly pinned. Time hadn't dulled her. If anything, it had sharpened her grace. "Mom," he said flatly, "what are you doing here?" What kind of son doesn't let his mother visit her own restaurant? She said, stepping inside. "Former restaurant," he corrected. "I just own the name now." She ignored that. "Still avoiding family dinners, I see." He sighed. "I don't have time for excuses." She interrupted gently. "You never do." Eleanor studied him for a long moment. There was love in her eyes, and something else. Heartbreak. "You look thinner," she said softly. "And colder." "I'm fine." "Of course you are." Her tone carried a mix of affection and disbelief. Nathaniel Wallace, the unbreakable man. Still pretending pain can't touch him. He turned his wheelchair toward the window, jaw tight. "Why are you here, Mom?" She smiled faintly. "To remind you that your father's foundation gala is coming up next month. And that as the current president of the Wallace Trust, you will be hosting it." "No." "Yes." He turned sharply. "That event is finished. It's been finished for 2 years, only because you canceled it after the accident. I wasn't exactly in a party mood." "I know," she said quietly. "But the world didn't stop turning, and the foundation still exists. Hundreds of people rely on it. The shelters, the youth programs, the hospital wing your father built. It's time to bring it back. I'm not parading myself in front of strangers to make them feel inspired," Nate snapped. "I'm done playing charity mascot." Eleanor stepped closer, eyes soft but steady. "It's not about them, Nathaniel. It's about you. It's about remembering who you were before you let pain define you. Silence. He looked down at his motionless legs, then away. After a long pause, he said bitterly, "Even if I agreed, who would help organize it? Half my staff fears me. The other half hates me." Eleanor smiled, a spark of mischief in her eyes. "Then maybe it's time someone reminded you what courage looks like," he frowned. "What are you talking about? Your manager mentioned a waitress who told you something interesting the other day." Nate's stomach tightened. "Grace?" Eleanor nodded. "That's her name. You spoke to her?" "I did." He turned his chair abruptly toward her. "Why?" "Because I wanted to meet the first person in years who dared tell my son the truth. She's a waitress, Mom. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Maybe not. But maybe that's what you need. Someone who speaks from the heart instead of the boardroom." Nate exhaled sharply. "What did you say to her?" "I invited her to perform at the charity gala." "What?" Eleanor's smile didn't waver. "She mentioned she used to dance in her church back home. I thought it was poetic, a dance at a charity event. Something simple, honest, human." "Mom, are you out of your mind?" "I've been told that before," she said calmly. "You want a waitress to dance in front of CEOs, donors, and politicians?" "Yes, that's insane." "What's insane," she countered, "is watching you rot in this cage you've built and pretending it's dignity." Her words hit him hard, not loud, not cruel, but true. Eleanor leaned down, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "You need to remember what grace looks like, Nathaniel. Sometimes it doesn't come from a ballroom dancer or a millionaire's daughter. Sometimes it comes from a girl who still believes in beauty, even when life gives her nothing but pain." He looked away. "You always did love your metaphors, and you always did hate hearing them." She smiled softly. "You'll thank me later. Don't count on it. Too late. The invitations are being printed." She kissed his cheek before he could protest and turn to leave. "Oh, and be nice to her. If I hear you made her cry, I'll move into your house for a month." "That's blackmail. That's motherhood." And with that, she left. Later that evening, Grace was in the staff room folding napkins when the manager approached. "Grace, mister. Wallace's mother wants to see you." Grace froze. "His mother?" "Yeah, she's in his office." "Don't worry, she's different." Different didn't begin to describe it. When Grace walked in, Eleanor greeted her with a warm smile that immediately disarmed her. "Grace, dear, thank you for coming. I've heard a lot about you." Grace smiled nervously. "All good things, I hope." "All true things," Eleanor said. "You told my son something bold." "I like that," Grace blushed. "I might have gone too far." "I didn't mean disrespect." Eleanor shook her head. "Honesty isn't disrespect, dear. It's courage." After a pause, she continued, "I'm hosting a charity gala here in 2 weeks. It's a big event, and I want you to be part of it as a performer." Grace blinked. "A performer?" "I heard you dance. I used to, in church." "But that was perfect," Eleanor interrupted. "Then it's settled." Grace hesitated, heart racing. "Ma'am, I'm flattered, but I can't. I'm not trained." "And Wallace, he'd never allow." Eleanor smiled knowingly. "Leave him to me." Before Grace could reply, Nate rolled in from the adjoining room, his expression a storm. "Mom, what the hell is this?" Eleanor turned gracefully. "Oh good, you're here. Save me a phone call. I told you. You told me many things, dear." "I rarely listen." Grace stood frozen, unsure if she should leave or disappear into thin air. Nate looked at her, jaw tight. "You agreed to this?" "I didn't know. She's not a dancer," he snapped. "Neither were you once," Eleanor replied calmly. "Until you learned." That hit him harder than he expected. Eleanor smiled softly, walking toward the door. 2 weeks, Nathaniel. Try not to ruin it before then." She turned to Grace. "I'll have someone send you a dress. Red suits you, I think." Then she left, her perfume lingering like a promise. The office fell silent. Grace swallowed hard. "Sir, I'm sorry. I didn't mean." He cut her off. "You're really going through with this?" "She didn't give me much choice." He let out a humorless laugh. "Perfect. You'll make a fool of yourself, and everyone will clap out of pity." Grace met his gaze, steady. "Then they'll clap." He froze, not because of her words, but the tone behind them. Simple, fearless. "Dismissed," he said finally, spinning his chair away. She turned to leave, but before she did, she whispered, "You could use a little grace yourself, Mr. Wallace." His hand tightened on the armrest. When the door closed, he exhaled slowly, staring at the reflection of his own face in the glass. He hated her. Or maybe he hated that he didn't. That night, as rain tapped softly against the restaurant windows, Grace stayed behind after closing. She walked into the empty ballroom, barefoot, the city lights glittering outside. The piano stood waiting, quiet under its dust. She touched the keys, hesitant at first, then let her body sway to an invisible rhythm. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't professional, but it was real. Her movements were simple, raw, the kind that came from a place deeper than technique. A place called survival. Unseen from the darkened hallway, Nate watched through the crack in the door. He didn't move, didn't breathe. For the first time in 2 years, the sound of silence didn't feel empty. It felt alive. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days. Dallas shimmered beneath it. Streets silver, headlights smeared like brushstrokes across the wet asphalt. Inside the Ember House, the restaurant slept. Tables polished, lights dimmed. Only the soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Except for one sound. A piano note, soft, hesitant. Grace was there again, barefoot on the ballroom floor. Her hair hung loose, her uniform replaced by an old t-shirt and leggings. She moved to the melody she hummed under her breath, a church song half forgotten, half prayer. She turned, misstepped, caught herself, laughed quietly. The echo of that small laugh reached the hallway, and Nate heard it. He'd come to the restaurant late, restless, unable to sleep. He told himself he was checking invoices, but that was a lie. He'd known she would be there. For a moment he just watched, hidden in the shadow of the doorway. She moved clumsily, earnestly, without vanity. Each motion was a confession, of fatigue, of hope, of defiance. When she stumbled again, he spoke. "You're leading with the wrong foot." Grace gasped, spinning around. "Mr. Wallace!" "I didn't know anyone was here." "I noticed," he said dryly, rolling into the light. "I was just practicing. At 2 a.m. It's the only time the floor's mine." He looked around the dark room, then back at her. "You call that practicing?" Grace crossed her arms. "What do you call it?" "Wasting effort," she frowned. "You really can't help yourself, can you?" He almost smiled. Almost. Then he gestured toward the center of the room. "You're forcing the turns. That's why you keep losing balance." She blinked. "And how would you know that?" He looked at the piano, at the mirrors, at ghosts. "Because I used to dance." Grace's eyes softened. "Before the accident?" He didn't answer. The silence was answer enough. Finally she said, "Then maybe you should teach me." He gave a small laugh, sharp but uncertain. "I haven't danced in years. That'll be two people relearning something." That line disarmed him. He wheeled closer, stopping beside her. "Fine. First rule, stop trying so hard. Dancing isn't a fight. It's a conversation." She tilted her head. "Between who?" "Between your heart and the world," he said quietly. The air seemed to pause. Nate motioned with his hand. "Show me the step again." Grace obeyed, repeating the movement. He studied the rhythm, then moved his hands in the air, guiding, tracing shapes. "Loosen your shoulders. Don't drag the air. Let it carry you." She tried again. "Better." He nodded. "See? Flow, not force." Grace smiled. "You really did dance. Ballroom. Charity events, weddings. Back when I could still fake being charming." She laughed. a soft melodic sound that startled him with how alive it felt. Who was your partner? His gaze drifted toward the mirrors. Someone who left when the music stopped. She didn't push. She simply said, "Her loss." That made him look at her. Really look, no pity, no curiosity, just truth. He swallowed. "You should rest. The gala's in 10 days. Can't," she said, stretching her leg. "If I stop, I'll forget everything." He shook his head. "You'll burn out before you get there. Then at least I'll burn for something." Something in him cracked open. He wheeled to the piano, lifted the lid, and let his fingers hover above the keys. Grace watched, wide-eyed. "You play?" "Badly, but better than silence." He pressed a few chords, halting, clumsy, then smoother. A waltz began to form, hesitant and broken, like two souls trying to remember how to breathe together. "Try it with this," he said. Grace stepped forward. The melody wrapped around her like light. She moved slowly, each motion syncing with his uncertain rhythm. For the first time, the room felt full, not of guests, not of money, but of life. Halfway through, she tripped. He stopped playing. "Again," he said. "I'm tired," she admitted. "So am I," he replied. "We keep going anyway." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Not romance. Not yet recognition. Two people carrying invisible weights, finding balance in each other's presence. When the last chord faded, Grace whispered, "Thank you, Mr. Wallace." He stared at his hands. "Don't thank me yet. If you ruin my mother's gala, she'll kill us both." Grace grinned. "Then we'd better make it worth dying for." He laughed, genuinely, quietly, maybe for the first time in years. The following nights they met again and again. Always after closing. Always in secret. Nate would play, Grace would dance. Sometimes they argued about tempo. Sometimes they worked in silence, breathing in sync like old partners rediscovering rhythm. Each night, something softened. He started asking about her mother. She started bringing him coffee. He learned she used to dream of studying dance but traded ballet shoes for bills. She learned he once raised millions for underprivileged kids before bitterness consumed him. One night she asked, "Why did you stop helping people?" He stared at the keys. "Because helping didn't stop the pain." "Maybe it's not supposed to," she said. "Maybe it just reminds you you're still alive." He looked at her then, really looked, and said nothing. But a small, tired smile crossed his face. By the end of the week, the difference was visible to everyone. Staff whispered that Mr. Wallace had changed. He still barked orders, still demanded perfection, but there was something else beneath the surface. A trace of warmth. And Grace? She danced lighter. Even exhaustion seemed to glow on her skin like purpose. Late Friday night, as they finished another secret rehearsal, Nate stopped playing mid-song. "What?" she asked. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll bring something better than my rusty fingers. A real musician. You need to feel music, not survive it." Grace smiled. "You already play better than you think." He met her eyes, a quiet honesty between them. "And you already dance better than you believe." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she stepped back, whispering, "Good night, Mr. Wallace." He hesitated. "Good night, Grace." The way he said her name made her heart stutter, not out of romance but recognition. As if for the first time, someone had truly seen her. That night, Nate couldn't sleep. He stared at the ceiling, hearing the faint echo of her footsteps on marble, the rustle of her laughter in the dark. He'd spent 2 years dead inside. Now somehow, one waitress's stubborn courage had woken him, note by note, step by step. He didn't know where it was leading. He only knew one thing. For the first time since the accident, he wanted tomorrow to come. 2 weeks later, the Ember House looked nothing like a restaurant. It was a palace. White and gold banners hung from the balcony. Strings of lights spilled across the ceiling like constellations. A string quartet rehearsed near the stage, and the scent of roses drifted from every table. The annual Wallace Foundation Charity Gala revived from the dead. And tonight, its host, the man the world had written off, was back in public for the first time in 2 years. The calm before the noise, Nate watched the transformation from the edge of the hall. Tailored tuxedo, polished chair, expression unreadable. His mother, radiant in silver, adjusted his bow tie with a touch that only a mother could get away with. "You look handsome," she said. "I look like a headline waiting to happen." "Then give them one worth reading." Guests began arriving: politicians, CEOs, philanthropists, the entire upper crust of Dallas. Every handshake felt staged, every compliment rehearsed. They looked at him the way people look at a tragedy they can't stop watching. Nate smiled through it, but his hands trembled slightly on the armrest. From the kitchen doorway, Grace watched him. She wore the red dress Eleanor had chosen, soft fabric that caught the light with every breath. Her stomach twisted into knots. "Ready?" whispered Lisa, the manager. "No," Grace breathed. "But I'll do it anyway. That's the spirit," Lisa said, squeezing her hand. The opening toast, the gala began with clinking glasses and rehearsed speeches. Eleanor spoke first, her voice graceful, commanding. "2 years ago, my son closed these doors. Tonight he opens them again, not just to donors, but to life." Applause. Cameras flashed. Then Nate was pushed toward the stage. He faced the crowd, gripping the microphone like a lifeline. "Good evening," he said. "If you're here expecting the man I used to be, he's not coming. I fired him." Laughter rippled uneasily. "I don't have much to say about business, but I do know something about falling and about the people who help you stand, even when you can't use your legs." He paused, eyes scanning the room until they found Grace in the wings. "Tonight, we remember that strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it dances." He gestured toward the stage. "Grace Miller." Applause thundered. Grace felt her knees go weak. She stepped into the spotlight. The dance, the music began: soft piano, gentle strings. Grace moved like a heartbeat, slow, uncertain, finding rhythm one breath at a time. The audience leaned forward, expecting grace, maybe pity. But halfway through, it happened. A sharp pop from the speaker system. Then silence. The music died. Gasps spread through the crowd. The sound engineer panicked behind the curtains. Grace froze mid-motion, her eyes wide. The room held its breath. And then, instead of running, she exhaled, closed her eyes, and began to dance again. No music, just the soft brush of her bare feet against marble, the rhythm of her breathing, the whisper of her dress cutting through air. Her body became the song. Every turn spoke of loss. Every reach spoke of hope. Every fall carried the weight of someone who kept getting back up. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was sacred. The moment from his table, Nate felt something inside him split open. He could hear nothing, yet somehow everything. The scrape of her heel, the tremor in her breath, it all formed a melody his heart recognized before his mind did. He rolled forward, ignoring the startled whispers around him, until he was at the edge of the stage. Grace saw him. For a heartbeat, she stopped. Then he lifted a hand, palm up, an invitation. She nodded. The billionaire and the waitress began to move together, her steps circling his chair, his wheels turning in rhythm, an unspoken choreography born from pain and trust. It wasn't polished, it wasn't perfect, but it was alive. The audience rose to their feet in stunned silence as the final motion ended. Grace kneeling, Nate's hand resting lightly on hers, both breathing hard, eyes wet. And then the applause came. Louder than thunder. Longer than memory. Eleanor pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling freely. The speech, when the crowd finally quieted, Nate took the microphone again. His voice shook, but he didn't care. "All my life, I thought control was strength. That pain made me untouchable. But tonight, A girl with nothing reminded me that being untouchable just means being alone. He looked at Grace. Thank you for giving me back the part of me I buried with my pride. Then, turning to the audience, the Wallace Foundation isn't just reopening. We're rebuilding it for every kid who thinks they don't belong in a world of perfection. We'll fund therapy, art, and dance programs for people who've lost something so they can find what's left. Applause again, but different now, not polite, but human. Eleanor stepped forward and hugged her son, whispering, "Welcome back." Grace wiped her tears quietly at the edge of the stage. After the lights hours later, after the guests had left and the chandeliers dimmed, Grace walked back into the ballroom to collect her things. Nate was still there, staring at the empty space where they danced. "I thought billionaires left early," she teased softly. He turned his chair toward her. "I was waiting." "For what?" "To say thank you," Grace smiled. "You already did." "Not like that," he said. "I meant thank you for reminding me that I'm still part of the world." She looked at him, eyes warm. "You were never gone, Nate. You were just sitting still," he chuckled. "You're getting good at this motivational speaker thing. I learned from the best tyrant in Dallas." He laughed again, softer this time. Then he said, "You saved my life tonight." Grace shook her head. "No, I just danced." "You're the one who stood up." They shared a quiet moment. No music, no audience, just two souls breathing in the aftermath of redemption. Nate finally said, "Tomorrow, I'm starting the foundation project. I want you there." As coordinator of the arts program, her jaw dropped. "Me? I don't even have a degree. You have something better," he said. "Heart." She blinked back tears. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," she nodded. "Yes." He watched her walk toward the door, the hem of her red dress brushing the floor. Before she disappeared, she turned. "Good night, Mr. Wallace." He smiled. "Good night, Grace." When she was gone, Nate looked around the empty room. For once, silence didn't hurt. It healed. He wheeled to the piano, pressed a single key, a minor, the note that had haunted him since the crash. This time it didn't sound sad. It sounded like a beginning. Fade out. Morning sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the ballroom, revealing traces of the night before, scattered rose petals, empty glasses, forgotten programs. The echoes of applause still seemed to hang in the air. Nate sat alone near the stage, his tuxedo jacket draped over the back of his chair, coffee cooling in his hand. The city beyond the glass shimmered in the golden hour, alive and new. He hadn't slept, but for the first time in years, he didn't feel tired. He kept replaying the silence from the moment the music stopped, how she'd kept moving, how her bare feet on marble became the sound his soul had been waiting for. That silence had filled him with something he hadn't felt in years: peace. A knock came at the door. Grace peeked in, holding her shoes in one hand. "I figured you'd still be here," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "You figured right." She stepped inside, walking barefoot across the cold floor. "Last night was unreal." "Yeah," he murmured. "Still not sure if it happened or if I just dreamed it." She laughed. "If it was a dream, it was one heck of a standing ovation." He turned his chair toward her. "You did more than dance, Grace. You reminded a room full of strangers that we're all still human." Grace blushed, looking down. "You did that too, Nate. You just needed someone to turn the music back on." For a moment, they simply stood there, silence comfortable, not heavy. Then he said quietly, "I meant what I said last night. About the foundation. I'm rebuilding it. Art, dance, therapy programs, scholarships. Everything my father believed in before I shut it all down." She nodded. "That's beautiful. I want you to help run it," he continued. "You'll lead the arts division. Teach, mentor, hire instructors, whatever you need." Her mouth opened slightly. "I'm a waitress, Nate." "Not anymore," he said. "You're the reason it's alive again. You gave it meaning. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she quickly wiped them. "You don't owe me that." "I don't," he agreed. "But I want to." The tone in his voice left no room for argument. Grace smiled through the tears. "Then I'll do it. I'll make it matter." "You already have." A few weeks later, a banner hung above a renovated downtown building, the Wallace Foundation for Recovery and the Arts. Reporters filled the courtyard, cameras flashing as Nate rolled onto the stage. The press called it a miracle comeback, but to him, it wasn't about reputation anymore. He spoke simply, no grand performance this time, just truth. "I used to think success was measured by what I built," he told the crowd. "Then I lost everything I built and realized success is what survives when the walls fall. Pain doesn't end you, it reveals you. I'm still learning who I am, and that's okay." The crowd stood silent, listening. He gestured to the woman standing behind him. "This foundation wouldn't exist without Grace Miller, someone who reminded me that even when music stops, life keeps moving. Sometimes you just have to dance through the silence." Applause rose again, this time not for a performance, but for the truth in his words. Grace took the microphone, nervous but glowing. "When I met Mr. Wallace, I thought he was the coldest man I'd ever met. Turns out he was just waiting for the right reason to thaw." Laughter rippled softly through the crowd. "And for anyone out there who feels invisible," she added, "remember, your story doesn't end where it hurts. Sometimes the pain is just the place where the light gets in." The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the back of the audience, Eleanor wiped her eyes, smiling with the quiet pride only a mother knows. That night, after the ceremony, the two of them stood alone inside the new building. The floors were freshly polished, the walls covered with photographs from art programs they'd already begun funding. Grace traced one of the framed pictures, a young boy in a wheelchair painting a sunrise. "He's good," she said. "He's better than good," Nate replied. "He's free." She turned to him. "You did this." He shook his head. "We did this." A faint jazz song played from the speakers, the same waltz they had danced to before the silence. Grace smiled. "You remembered." "I had it remastered," he said. "Wanted the notes to live again." She stepped closer. "Then you owe me a dance," he chuckled. "I don't exactly have the right shoes." "Neither did I that night," she said, gently taking his hand. She guided his chair as the music wrapped around them. They moved slowly, her spinning, him turning the wheels in rhythm, both laughing softly when they bumped into each other. It wasn't a dance for show. It was a dance for living. When the song ended, they stood still, the world hushed around them. Nate looked at her, eyes calm. "You know, I used to hate mornings. They always meant another day I couldn't stand up. And now? Now they just mean another day I get to move." She smiled. "You really are standing, Nate, just in a different way." He reached out, touched her hand and whispered, "I guess we both are." The lights dimmed softly, their reflections merging in the glass windows. Two silhouettes, one sitting, one standing, both rising. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Cars passing, music from a nearby cafe, a world that suddenly felt wide open again. Inside, a man who once believed his life had ended finally began to live. And a woman who'd spent her whole life surviving finally began to dream. The camera would pull back slowly, showing them framed in the glow of the city, still moving together, quiet, tender, free. Autumn arrived quietly, like a deep breath after a storm. The foundation had been open for 6 months. Every corner of the old brick building now carried traces of life, laughter spilling from dance studios, brushes tapping against canvases, pianos filling hallways with imperfect, beautiful sound. Nate rolled through the lobby each morning and was greeted by faces that once would have made him look away. Young veterans learning to paint again, children in wheelchairs discovering rhythm, single parents taking evening art classes after work. He no longer saw tragedy. He saw movement. The world he'd built from pain was now overflowing with it. But this time, pain had purpose. Grace moved through the crowd with a clipboard in one hand and coffee in the other, hair tied back, smile bright and unguarded. She managed the entire art division now, organizing workshops, teaching classes, keeping the dream alive with that same stubborn heart that had once refused to break. Every time Nate saw her, he was reminded that life doesn't hand you miracles. It hands you people who feel like them. That afternoon, a bus pulled up outside the foundation. Children filed out, eyes wide, laughter echoing. Among them was a little girl in leg braces, holding her mother's hand. Grace knelt to greet her. "Hey there, sweetheart. You ready to dance?" The girl nodded shyly. Nate watched from a distance, his chest tightening with something that wasn't pain. It was gratitude, heavy and sweet. He remembered the version of himself who would have never noticed a moment like this. That man had been rich and powerful and completely bankrupt inside. Now he felt richer than he'd ever been. Later that evening, when the classes were over and the last light of day poured through the tall windows, Grace found Nate sitting in the courtyard behind the foundation. The sunset painted the sky in amber and rose, the same colors that had once filled the ballroom. She sat beside him on the stone bench, handing him a cup of tea. "You ever stop and think about how far you've come?" He smiled. "Only when you remind me. You should. You did something beautiful here." He looked around at the building, the garden, the laughter drifting from the open windows. "I didn't do it alone." Grace took a sip, her voice soft. "You know, sometimes I still think about that night. The gala, the silence. I do too," he said, "every day. It's when the world stopped judging me long enough for me to finally hear myself again." They sat in comfortable quiet for a moment. Then Nate spoke again, lower this time. "I used to believe my accident ended my story, that my life stopped the day I lost my legs. But the truth is," he looked at her, eyes steady, "that was just the end of a chapter. You helped me turn the page." Grace smiled, her eyes glistening. "And you helped me believe I was more than the life I ran from." A breeze swept through the courtyard, carrying the faint sound of piano from inside, one of the students practicing. The melody was clumsy but heartfelt. Grace tilted her head. "That song. It sounds familiar," Nate chuckled. "It's the waltz, the one from that night. I taught them the notes." She grinned. "Guess it's contagious." He turned toward her, sunlight fading behind his shoulders. "Grace, you ever wonder what comes next?" She looked out at the glowing skyline. "I think next is whatever we make it." He nodded, eyes softening. "Then let's make it worth dancing to." Months later, the foundation hosted its first annual recital, not for donors or cameras, but for the people who'd found themselves within those walls. The hall was packed, parents, teachers, children, veterans, artists, all waiting for the final performance. When the lights dimmed, a hush fell over the crowd. The curtain lifted to reveal Nate in his chair and Grace standing beside him. No fanfare, no speech, just two people ready to move again. Music filled the room, a gentle waltz, familiar and new at the same time. Their movements were slow, deliberate, perfectly in sync. He turned his chair in rhythm. She circled him with grace and lightness, hands brushing, eyes meeting, both smiling through the quiet tears that came without warning. Every motion told the story they'd lived, of loss, defiance, forgiveness, and rebirth. When the final note faded, they stayed still for a moment, breathing, eyes closed, as if afraid to break the spell. Then the applause began, thunderous, rising like a wave that carried everyone in the room. Grace bowed her head, laughing through tears. Nate looked out at the sea of faces, unable to stop smiling. Eleanor stood in the front row, her hand pressed to her heart, whispering, "That's my boy." Afterward, when the crowd had gone and the lights dimmed, Grace and Nate remained on the stage. He looked at her. "You know, I spent half my life chasing perfection. And did you find it?" she asked. He shook his head gently. "No, I found something better. What's that? Peace, she smiled. I'll take that. He reached for her hand. Grace, you once told me my prison wasn't the chair, it was my heart. I remember. He squeezed her fingers lightly. Well, I think you finally set me free. She didn't answer with words, only with a soft nod, the kind that says you're welcome without ever speaking it. The lights faded behind them, leaving the two silhouettes side by side, one seated, one standing, both shining against the quiet glow of the stage. Nate's voice carried softly through the darkness, more thought than sound. The chair took my legs, but her dance gave me back my life. The camera would pull away slowly, the world outside filled with city lights and moving cars, the rhythm of a life finally in motion again. Fade to black. The end.